collective mind. Right at the beginning of 1992's Candyman, we're introduced to the urban legend of a vengeful spirit who appears when someone says his name 5 times in front of a mirror.
Candyman.
The original monster is Daniel Robitaille, a black artist murdered in the 19th century, whose violent death turned into a myth passed down from generation to generation in Chicago neighborhoods. Decades later, the 2021 reboot Candyman arrived with new characters and a more modern perspective. The story follows Anthony McCoy, a visual artist who lives with his girlfriend Brianna, and starts researching the legend as inspiration for his work. As Anthony digs deeper into the story, strange things begin happening to his body and mind, while mysterious deaths start appearing around him. For years, fans had already raised the theory that Daniel wasn't the only Candyman. The 2021 version confirms this by introducing the so-called Candyman hive. Instead of a single villain, there's a kind of collective consciousness made up of the souls of black men who were unjustly murdered over time. Each victim becomes part of this supernatural swarm, reborn as a new manifestation of Candyman. Daniel appears as the main face of this group, but he isn't alone. He works almost like the symbolic leader of this larger entity. At the end of the movie, Anthony ends up being absorbed into the hive after his own death, also taking on the mantle of Candyman. The idea is clear: the monster isn't just one person, but the reflection of a continuous cycle of violence, trauma, and injustice that has never truly been broken. Jason is a deadite. Right at the beginning of Friday the 13th, Part 9, Jason goes to hell. Agents set up a trap and completely blow Jason's body apart. But that doesn't mean it's the end of the killer. On the contrary, from that point on, the movie reveals that Jason can survive by possessing different bodies, passing his evil essence from person to person like some kind of supernatural parasite. This is where a theory comes in that was practically confirmed by the director himself, Adam Marcus. Jason is a deadite, the demonic creatures from the Evil Dead franchise.
Oh, good. I was starting to feel like a real...
During one scene, the Necronomicon, the famous Book of the Dead, briefly appears along with the Kandarian dagger. A lot of people thought it was just an Easter egg, but Marcus later explained that it was actually the official explanation for the origin of Jason's evil. According to this interpretation, Pamela Voorhees used the book to resurrect her son after he drowned at Camp Crystal Lake. But Jason came back different, possessed by a demonic entity, exactly like what happens with the Deadites. That would explain why he never truly dies, why his body can be destroyed, and yet his consciousness stays alive, jumping to other hosts. In the movie, we also learn that only members of the Voorhees bloodline can kill him for good, which turns Jessica Kimball, his distant niece, into the key piece in ending the curse. The idea even received approval from Sam Raimi, creator of Evil Dead, and became the closest thing to an official crossover between the universes. Something that would later only really be explored in the comic series Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash. The Thorn curse. In Halloween, Michael Myers reveals himself to be much more than just a simple killer. As a child, he murders his own sister and years later escapes from a psychiatric hospital to return to Haddonfield, where he begins stalking Laurie Strode while leaving a trail of bodies behind. Silent, slow, and practically indestructible, Michael became the classic slasher model who never dies. For a long time, fans tried to explain this. The most direct answer came in 1995's Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, especially in the producer's cut. In that movie, it's revealed that Michael was chosen as a child by a cult called the Cult of Thorn. This group believes in an ancient druid symbol connected to the constellation of Thorn, which grants supernatural strength to its bearer and forces him to kill members of his own family.
Don't kill the baby. You can stop it. You know whose baby it is, don't you?
According to this version, Michael doesn't kill for pleasure or personal revenge. He acts because he's cursed, controlled by this mystical influence since childhood. The cult turns him into a living weapon, someone incapable of stopping, programmed to eliminate his own blood whenever the cycle demands a new sacrifice. The movie shows doctors involved with the cult, secret rituals, and even attempts to transfer the curse to someone else. In this specific timeline, known as the Jamie Lloyd trilogy, Laurie Strode is already dead, so the target becomes her daughter Jamie, who turns into the central piece of the prophecy. Even though many consider this explanation confusing and over the top, it officially transforms Michael Myers into something far more supernatural than he seemed at the beginning. The Survivor. In Saw, we meet Dr. Lawrence Gordon, a respected surgeon who wakes up chained inside an abandoned bathroom next to Adam, a photographer he doesn't know. The two discover they were placed there by Jigsaw, a killer who creates deadly games to test the value of his victims' lives. To escape, Gordon is given an impossible choice: kill Adam or lose his own family. Desperate, he ends up sawing off his own foot and crawling out of the room, leaving behind one of the most shocking scenes in horror history. For years, the franchise never showed what really happened to him after that. Many fans thought it was unlikely that Gordon had simply bled to death, especially especially since he was a doctor. On top of that, the bathroom where everything happened is never discovered by authorities, which opened the door to a popular theory: someone helped him survive. The confirmation only comes in Saw 3D, presented as the final chapter of the saga. It's revealed that Jigsaw himself found Gordon while he was dying and treated his wounds. Instead of seeking revenge, Gordon ends up becoming a silent ally, helping John Kramer behind the scenes, while adapting to his new life with a prosthetic in place of his foot. The transformation is complete. The man who started as a victim becomes part of the games, recruiting people and even assisting in the execution of traps. At the end of the movie, he reappears leading 2 other survivors to capture the villain Hoffman, locking the former apprentice inside the same bathroom where everything began. That detail completely changes how we see the character. Lawrence Gordon not only survived, he embraced Jigsaw's twisted philosophy. Is Get Out a sequel? In the opening scenes of Get Out, it's clear that Chris Washington isn't walking into a normal situation. He travels with his girlfriend Rose Armitage to meet her family at a secluded mansion in the middle of nowhere. Chris is a black photographer, and he quickly starts noticing strange behavior. The Black House staff act like robots. The family's guests look at him like he's a product, and everyone keeps commenting on his body.
Not bad. Hey, Nielsen?
As the weekend goes on, Chris uncovers the real horror behind the Armitages' polite smiles. The family is part of a disturbing scheme in which white people transfer their consciousness into black bodies, using a mix of hypnosis and neurosurgery. The original victim is left trapped in what's called the sunken place, fully conscious but with no control over their own body. Up to this point, everything seems like a powerful social critique wrapped in psychological horror. But a wild theory gained traction when Jordan Peele himself joined the conversation. Get Out could be an indirect sequel to Being John Malkovich. The idea comes from the fact that Catherine Keener appears in both films. According to this reading, she would be playing the same character. After learning how to exploit mental portals that allow someone to control John Malkovich's body, her character would have changed identities, married into the Armitage family, and helped evolve the method. What used to be a bizarre experiment becomes a refined, large-scale system for consciousness transplants. It sounds absurd, but Peele has stated that for him, the connection is valid.
I love this theory. I have heard this theory. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's true.
In other words, what started as a surreal comedy about body possession eventually turned decades later into an organized system of body appropriation, making Get Out an unexpected continuation of one of the strangest movies of the 90s, The Closed Loop. In Final Destination 5, everything starts the way fans of the franchise already know very well. A group of co-workers is crossing a massive bridge when one of them has a horrifying premonition. He panics, convinces a few people to get off the bus, and seconds later, the accident happens exactly as he foresaw. The survivors believe they've cheated death, but it doesn't take long for it to come back and claim each of them. And as always, the characters try to figure out the pattern behind the deaths, discover new rules about how to trick it, and begin to suspect there might be a way to break the cycle. The story follows the classic format of the series, making the audience assume it's just another direct sequel, but the real twist comes at the end. In the final scene, the surviving protagonists board a plane for a business trip. The camera moves through the cabin, the mood gets tense, and then comes the reveal. They're on Flight 180, the same plane that explodes in the first Final Destination. Suddenly, everything makes sense. The entire movie takes place in the year 2000, before the original events, turning the 5th installment into a disguised prequel. Some more attentive fans had already suspected this before the premiere, thanks to subtle clues like older car models and time references scattered throughout the story. Even so, the moment caught a lot of people off guard. In seconds, the characters realize too late where they are. The plane takes off, and fate closes the cycle exactly where it all began, connecting the beginning and the end of the franchise in one cruel, unbroken line. Project Arrowhead. The Mist follows David Drayton, an artist who gets trapped inside a supermarket with his son and several townspeople after a mysterious fog swallows everything outside. Anyone who steps out to investigate simply doesn't come back, and it quickly becomes clear that massive creatures are hiding inside the mist. For most of the movie, the origin of the fog seems completely supernatural, but the twist was there the whole time. Throwaway conversations, soldiers moving around the nearby town of Shemore, and lines about military experiments leave clear hints that this didn't just come from nowhere. The most accepted theory, practically confirmed by the film, points to Project Arrowhead, a secret army experiment that was trying to open windows between dimensions. One character even directly asks if all of this is because of Arrowhead.
It's the Arrowhead Project, isn't it? This mist.
While others mention scientists trying to see into other worlds.
How they thought that there were other dimensions. other worlds.
In early versions of the script, director Frank Darabont made it even more explicit. A storm would have caused the experiment to fail, tearing open a dimensional portal and releasing the monsters. That scene was cut specifically to keep the kind of ambiguity typical of Stephen King. Even without showing it outright, the clues are everywhere. The real horror isn't just the mist, it's human arrogance messing with forces it doesn't understand. Something interesting about all this is that Stephen King has said he loved the movie's ending, especially because it's even crueler than the one in the original novella, which is rare for adaptations of his work. Eternal Caretaker. In The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's classic, we follow Jack Torrance, a frustrated writer who takes a job as the winter caretaker of the isolated Overlook Hotel. He brings his wife Wendy and his son Danny to spend months alone there while he tries to write a book. Danny, meanwhile, has psychic abilities known as The Shining, which makes him especially sensitive to the hotel's strange presences. The twist hidden right in front of us appears at the end of the film. After Jack's full descent into madness, the camera shows an old photograph from 1921 hanging on the wall of the Overlook. There he is, smiling in the middle of a party, decades before he was even born. Shortly before that, the ghost of the former caretaker had already dropped the disturbing line.
But you are the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker.
For many fans, this suggests that Jack is the reincarnation of a former caretaker of the hotel, doomed to repeat the same cycle of violence forever. Others prefer the theory that the Overlook simply absorbs its victims. But Kubrick himself in older interviews supported the reincarnation idea, giving even more weight to that interpretation. If you look closely, the entire movie plants clues about it. Jack seems to feel at home in the Overlook from day one, knows hallways he's never walked through, and connects quickly with the ghosts, almost like he's just stepping back into an old role. The final photo was created specifically for the film, using Jack Nicholson's face inserted into a real vintage image. The Flawed Resurrection. The Puppet Master franchise follows André Toulon, a master puppeteer who discovered an ancient secret for bringing dolls to life using a mystical formula. These puppets become killers loyal to their creator, each with their own deadly specialty. The series timeline is all over the place, since several later films work as prequels, showing a more human, sensitive, and even protective version of Toulon. But in Puppet Master 2, everything changes. Here, Toulon is already dead and comes back to life thanks to Pinhead, the small-headed puppet. He reappears disguised as an old man named Ark Chen, but now he's aggressive, cold, and starts killing without mercy. That always felt strange to fans because in the prequels, Andre is portrayed as someone who creates the puppets to defend himself from Nazis and protect his legacy, not as a pure villain. This contrast sparked a classic horror theory. The resurrection went wrong. Many believed something was lost in the process and that Toulon came back corrupted. For years, that was just speculation, until the official comic series published between 2015 and 2018 by Action Lab Comics confirmed the idea. According to the canon material, Andre's return really was flawed, twisting his personality and turning former obsessive traits into pure bloodlust. In other words, the villain in Puppet Master 2 isn't exactly the same man from the earlier films. Shared universe. Alien and Blade Runner are two classics by Ridley Scott that for many years seemed to only share the same director and a similar atmosphere, but attentive fans started noticing something strange. The two movies might take place in the exact same universe. In Alien, we follow the crew of the Nostromo, including Ellen Ripley, as they respond to a distress call and end up encountering a deadly creature on a distant planet. In Blade Runner, the story unfolds in a futuristic, decaying Los Angeles, where Rick Deckard hunts androids known as replicants, created by the powerful Tyrell Corporation. The shared universe theory came up because both films portray an oppressive corporate future, space colonies, and humans living alongside artificial life forms. But it doesn't stop there. There are direct Easter eggs connecting the two franchises. One example is a computer interface that looks almost identical, used by Ripley in Alien and by Gaff in Blade Runner. On top of that, official Alien DVD materials reveal that Dallas, the captain of the Nostromo, previously worked for the Tyrell Corporation, the same company featured in Blade Runner. Ridley Scott pretty much sealed the deal when commenting on Blade Runner, stating that the crew of Alien could very well live in the same city as Deckard. In other words, the replicants and the xenomorph are part of the same dystopian future. That connection also helps explain why the technology in Alien feels both advanced and outdated at the same time, with green screens and slow computers. It's the same world as Blade Runner, where megacorporations control everything, but the aesthetic remains dirty, industrial, and far from the clean, shiny futurism typical of sci-fi. The Ghostface family. Scream 6 takes Ghostface to New York and follows sisters Sam and Tara Carpenter as they try to start over over far from Woodsboro. But the past doesn't let anyone go, and soon a new wave of murders begins, bringing back the classic game of threatening phone calls and suspects everywhere. Since the very first films, the franchise trained the audience with a nearly fixed rule: there are always 2 killers behind the mask. It became tradition. With each sequel, fans wondered if the series would ever break that pattern and introduce 3 ghost faces at the same time. In Scream 6, that finally happened. In the 3rd act, it's revealed that the entire Bailey family is involved in the crimes. Detective Wayne Bailey, along with his children Ethan and Quinn, planned everything as revenge for Richie's death, the ghost face from the previous movie. They operate together and coordinate attacks in different parts of the city, which explains how Ghostface seems to be in multiple places at once. Technically, you could even count 4 killers if you include Jason, the Ghostface from the opening scene, who murders before being quickly eliminated. But the real twist is the family trio, something completely new for the franchise. The truth is, Scream 2 almost had 3 killers, but a script leak forced the producers to change everything at the last minute. More than 20 years later, Scream 6 finally brought that idea to life, turning an old fan theory into reality. Broken Mind. In Shutter Island, we followed Teddy Daniels, a U.S. Marshal who arrives at a remote island to investigate the disappearance of a patient at a maximum security psychiatric hospital. The place is isolated and constantly battered by storms, creating an atmosphere of paranoia from the very first minute. Teddy is accompanied by his partner Chuck as he tries to question evasive doctors and disturbed patients. But as he explores the island, strange things begin happening. Teddy suffers violent migraines, has constant visions, and is haunted by dreams involving a blonde woman and his 3 young children. In some of those scenes, the woman suddenly disappears. In others, everything is surrounded by fire. These details were already scattered throughout the trailer, which led part of the audience to guess the twist before the premiere. The investigation was never real. Teddy isn't a lawman. He is, in fact, Andrew Laetis, a patient at the very hospital. The truth slowly comes out. Andrew killed his wife after she drowned their 3 children.
Please, God, no!
Unable to deal with the guilt, he created an alternate personality, Teddy Daniels, and began living inside an elaborate fantasy where he was a hero, uncovering a conspiracy. The entire case was a therapeutic roleplay staged by the island's doctors, hoping to make him accept reality. In the end, Andrew seems to regain awareness for a brief moment, but then leaves the air with a chilling line.
Which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man?
On the screen, there's a video where we show horror movies that break the 4th wall to scare you. Click and watch. I'll see you there.